In this video, you'll learn how to define and use variables in Kotlin. There are two main keywords to define variables, val and var. Val comes from value and denotes a read-only or assign once variable, while var comes from variable and denotes mutable variable, the one that can be modified. Read-only variable can't be reassigned. If you try to assign a new value to it, you'll get the compiler error. In essence, val in Kotlin corresponds to a final variable in Java. If you need to reassign a variable, you declare it as var. Then you can easily assign a new value to it. In Kotlin, you can omit the types of variables and the compiler will infer the types for you. Here we omitted the types of these two variables and they are inferred automatically by the compiler. Kotlin is a statically typed language, which means that every variable, every expression has a type. Even if you omit the type, the compiler just infers it for you. It doesn't mean that this variable doesn't have a type or it's unknown. It means that the type specification is verbose. It's clear from the context and you trust the compiler to infer the type. The question to you: why doesn't the following code compile? Because you can't reassign a var variable, because you can't assign an integer value to a variable of string type, or assign a string literal to a variable of int type. The third option is correct. Because of the local type inference here, int type of the variable is inferred. It's called string, but it was done on purpose only to confuse you. The type of this string variable is int. And the Kotlin compiler complains that you try to assign a string literal to a variable of an int type, but int is expected. That's the compiler error. Another question for you. Is it possible to modify an object stored in val? What do you think? There are options yes and no. If we are talking about reference types in Kotlin as in Java, variables just refer to some object stored in memory. And this question can be reworded as, does val put any additional constraints on the stored object? Of course, there are no additional constraints. You can easily modify an object stored in val as in Java. Val, like a final variable, is mutable reference which doesn't say anything about the content that is stored. For example, here we have a reference to a mutable list. Languages refers to an object in memory. We can modify this object by accessing the modification method. We can't assign another reference to the language's variable, but we can easily modify this exact object. Another question. What do you think? Why doesn't the following code compile? That might be a source of confusion for people who are new to Kotlin. The declared variable has the type list, but when you try to modify it, you see an error. What do you think? That's because you can't modify a read-only list or modify an object stored in val. You can't modify a read-only list. We've already discussed that val doesn't give you any guarantees about the content stored in an object. The content can be easily modified, so the second option is wrong. In Kotlin, we have a distinction between mutable and read-only lists. Note that we use the same keywords mutable and read-only as for variables. In this case, read-only list just likes mutating methods. If you try to call add on a Kotlin list, which is a read-only list, the compiler will complain that there is no such method available. By default, strive to declare all your new variables with val keyword, not var. Using immutable references, immutable objects, and functions without side effects makes your code closer to the functional style, which is easier to understand and support in the end. When type specifications are clear from the context, it's safe to omit them. For instance, if it's variable of a primitive type or string, or the type is clear from the variable name, that's rather straightforward. However, if any confusion of what's going on is possible, it's better just to have this type specification explicitly, to keep it, to avoid this confusion. In this video, you've learned about two different keywords to define variables in Kotlin. Val for read-only variables and var for a variable that you may need to modify later. Next, we are going to discuss functions.